Of all the Force users that existed during the time of the Clone Wars, Dooku was easily among the most dangerous and powerful. While Sidious may have been the strongest Sith Lord, he operated within the shadows, rarely coming out of hiding to do anything himself. But for a significant period of the war, whenever Dooku was on the move, it was only the Grand Master and Yoda who stood a chance at defeating him. This was, of course, until Dooku's age got the better of him, and Anakin Skywalker's power increased. But before Anakin was inducted into the Jedi Order as its most talented Padawan, that accolade had once belonged to a young Dooku. And in today's holocron, we want to ask a very simple question. Had Dooku not died to Anakin's blade, could he have possibly grown to surpass even Darth Sidious? Well, we have found something truly shocking, and truthfully believe that now within the lore, Dooku could be substantially more powerful than we previously anticipated. So greetings again, students of the Force, and welcome to the archives. Our goal today is to have a factual discussion about Dooku's power, skill, and potential to see if in another timeline he could have grown to the level where he could challenge Sidious for the position as Lord of the Sith. We ask a lot of you to humor this video, as although it may seem far-fetched at first, Dooku has been repeatedly stated in lore to have been one of the most talented Jedi of not only the era, but in the Order's history. This was outright stated in the novel for Revenge of the Sith. In fact, we have several references which speak to Dooku's insane potential. Master Thame, one of Dooku's own teachers in Legends continuity, once commented that Dooku was the most talented Padawan that he had ever seen. And this was something that Yoda often corroborated. In Yoda Dark Rendezvous, Yoda once commented to the High Council that he considered Dooku to be the Jedi's strongest and its wisest student, and that he was the most learned in the ways of the Force. Despite this being at a time when Dooku had turned to the dark side, none of the council members disagreed with Yoda, including Windu. Yoda thought extremely highly of his Padawan's potential, and in the Attack of the Clones illustrated guide, it was stated that Dooku's power made him enigmatic to Yoda. And to finish all of this off, we are told in Star Wars Insider number 113 that had Dooku not departed from the Jedi Order, eventually he would have become a master on par with the level of Yoda, and a worthy applicant for the Grand Master. His Jedi potential was maddeningly high, which was why it was such a travesty when he embraced the dark side. As Darth Tyrannus, his power gained a significant boost. This allowed him to essentially come close to defeating Yoda in a confrontation of the Force and then with the lightsaber. There were a ton of factors going into this though, such as limited time for Dooku, and perhaps had they kept fighting, Yoda would have come out on top due to his superior knowledge and experience. But on a basis of power alone, we know Yoda was shocked at what his apprentice had become. At the time of Attack of the Clones, George Lucas even stated that Yoda and Dooku were essentially equal in power in terms of their Force ability. It was actually the Battle of Geonosis that let Yoda know just how strong Darth Sidious was, which made the Grand Master extremely worried. Tyrannus had been so strong that it made the Council doubt whether or not Sidious even existed, as they could not fathom anyone beyond Dooku, especially without them knowing about it, because this would mean that Sidious would have been stronger than perhaps even Yoda if Dooku and Yoda were truly equal here. When Maul returned from the Clone Wars, Windu firmly stated that Darth Tyrannus was his master, and that Maul was the apprentice, which is told to us in the Son of Dathomir comic. What is absolutely terrifying about Dooku though, may give credence to his ability to reach Palpatine's level. This is where, for a brief period of time during the middle of the Clone Wars, Dooku gained even more power, even more than he had in Attack of the Clones. This was when he began his Sith Holocron collection, and a particular one known as the Dark Holocron ended up increasing his strength in the dark side exponentially. The Dark Holocron was an ancient artifact that was retrieved by Jedi Master Odan from one of Naga Sadow's ships. It was the first holocron that the Jedi ever found, and to this day it is unknown who crafted it. But although its constructor is unknown, its contents are not, enhancing anyone who studied it. Not to mention, as an apprentice of the Rule of Two, Dooku had access to a ton of Sith knowledge from those that had come before. We know that at some point, he became obsessed with Sith lore himself, and just like Sidious, he studied it obsessively. According to the Book of the Sith, Sidious encouraged Dooku to study one Sith in particular. That Sith Lord was Darth Bane. If we examine the Book of the Sith ourselves, this would mean that Dooku had access to the knowledge of how to transcend the feelings of pain, enhancing his body to produce flame-like heat, to use his fists as deadly weapons, to drain the heat out of another, freezing them even from the inside out using the Force, The Force was opened up to Dooku on a level that he had not seen before. Whether or not Dooku could perform this is another question though. Dooku still though did have the knowledge of Force Drain, an ability to cast it around himself, producing essentially a field of death for the Force. Along with that, Dooku had the power of the mind such as Force Insanity. He could blind others with his mental tactics. He could memory walk and mind shard. All of this was literally the act of mentally splitting an opponent's mind, racking them with pain, cutting them off from the Force. Using these powers, Dooku circumvented all of the tricks of the Jedi, which was why he was so good at torturing them. This is why Quinlan Vos fell to the dark side under Dooku. We also know that Dooku performed Sith alchemy with Sidious in the Clone Wars, and the fact that he created two near-perfect doppelgangers in Legends, doppelgangers that would fight Anakin Skywalker, gives us a good idea at just how learned Dooku was, along with his natural latent talent. Technically, if we go based on what we have seen and shown from Dooku before in the lore, this would mean that for a brief period of time, he may have been stronger than Yoda, especially if we take into account what George Lucas said. Sidious during this was extremely wary of Dooku. We haven't even talked about Dooku's saber skill yet, and Palpatine was growing concerned. He was having to keep his apprentice watched in order to both protect himself and the Sith Grand Plan. This was the main reason why he commanded Dooku to eliminate Ventress. If Tyrannus had too many allies, Sidious would be in real trouble. But alone, could Tyrannus actually have one day challenged Sidious for the title? Well, my friends, the answer is no. Dooku is indeed one of the most powerful Force users of this era, but he was still less than Sidious will always be. What we described was Dooku at the apex of his power, being around 80 to 82 years old. But by the time Dooku was 83, he had significantly weakened from the war. All of that titanic power had come at a cost, which was his vitality. We talked about this in a previous video, but Dooku was incredibly weak by the time of his death due to darkside degradation. This is the ravaging of the flesh that occurs to all darkside practitioners. Dooku had become a Sith Lord at the age of 70, and had spent simply too much of his life as a Jedi. When he joined Sidious, all of that immense power in the light that he had built up was keeping him healthy. But this would all flip with a switch. When he embraced the dark side, he got a massive boost in power, but it destroyed his already old body. Dooku did not live in the darkness as Sidious had. Sidious was born of the dark side, and therefore, Dooku's dark side degradation was accelerated. In the lore, we believe that Sidious passed Yoda and Dooku in power 20 years prior to Revenge of the Sith, when he killed his master Darth Plagueis. In the Darth Plagueis novel, it is implied that Sidious got a 10x increase in power when he elevated from apprentice to master. The dark side selected him as its representative, which instantly granted Palpatine so much power that he thought that he would be unable to absorb it. By the time of 19 BBY, while Dooku was starting to go downhill, Sidious's power was still growing. He would only go on to increase his power over the next 20 years, and the Dark Lord handled Yoda during their confrontation in the Senate Hall. No, he could not beat the Grandmaster blade to blade, but it has been explicitly told through several sources that Sidious was superior to Yoda in the Force, which only makes sense if Yoda and Dooku were equal. Even with Dooku's elevated power thanks to the Clone Wars, we saw Sidious easily force choke him through a hologram. Had Dooku kept on living, it wouldn't have made him better, it would have made him worse. Even if Dooku did discover the knowledge of how to keep himself fresh in the body as Sidious had, it would be too little too late. As harsh as it all sounds, by the time Anakin killed Dooku, Tyrannus had already peaked and had officially outlived his usefulness. It's all a real shame, truthfully. Had Dooku chosen one path or the other much earlier in life, he could have been Sidious's legitimate equal. And on the other side of the same coin, had he remained a Jedi, he could have exceeded the power of Yoda, or perhaps matched him as Grand Master. Darth Plagueis had once played with the idea of Dooku being a backup apprentice should Sidious fail. Had he been taken into the Sith around that era, the story could be very different, making Dooku and Sidious legitimate rivals to the Sith throne. But Dooku instead reached just shy of his greatest potential, not only as a Sith Lord, but also as a Jedi. And that is why we believe that Dooku could not surpass Palpatine, even if he were allowed to live on. Simply put, Sidious's power is in a completely different plane. But Tyrannus is absolutely no slouch, and had a lot of things gone his way, he could have been more powerful. We can count on our fingers how many people really rival Yoda in strength, and for Dooku to be among them is no small feat. But as always, friends, thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.